Alright, let's get started with part 2 of Bolshevism in Russia. This is Mr. Alaton to Mr. Balfour, received September 18th. In Vladivostok, September 16th, 1918. His Majesty's Council at Ekaterinburg, Mr. Preston, who left that place on September 1st, has just arrived here and has given the following information as to fate of the Russian imperial family. Ex-Emperor of Russia and Grand Duchess Tatiana were brought from Tobolsk to Ekaterinburg by Bolsheviks on the 1st of May, 1918. Emperor was given suitable quarters near British consulate. Rest of the imperial family, including ex-empress, other 3 daughters, and the Chevarchiks, arrived a few days later. Members of suite, including Prince Dolgoruki, as well as British and French tutors who came with the imperial family from Tobolsk, were not allowed to remain with the emperor at Ekaterinburg and returned to Tobolsk. Prince Dolgoruki was kept in prison, where he either eventually died or was killed. Prince Dolgoruki frequently asked me, as doyen of Consular Corps, at least to try and obtain better conditions of living for the imperial family. It was impossible for me, however, to do anything, and when I interceded for the princess, whom I said I was protecting as a Serbian ally, I was threatened with arrest. When the Czech advance on Chelyabinsk commenced, the Ekaterinburg Bolshevik government, who already had considerable friction with central Bolshevik government on money matters, began to use threats against the imperial family as a means of extorting funds from central government. When Bolsheviks knew they would have to evacuate Ekaterinburg owing to the approach of the Czechs, they asked the people's commissars at Moscow what they should do with the emperor. The reply they received was, "Do whatever you think fit." At a meeting of the Ural soldiers and workmen's delegates held on the 16th of July, a decision was come to that the emperor should be shot, and that this decision was communicated to him, and sentence carried out by the Lettish soldiers in the same night. However, no trace has ever been found of the body. The rest of the members of the imperial family were taken away to an unknown destination immediately after this. It is said that they were burnt alive, as various articles of jewelry have been identified as belonging to them by their old servants, and their charred remains are said to have been found in a house burnt to the ground. It is still thought possible that the Bolsheviks took them north when they retreated to Verkhodory. The following Grand Dukes were in captivity near Ekaterinburg at Alpavix, besides the ex-emperor George Konstantinovich, Ivan Konstantinovich, and Serge Mikhailovich. Princess Helene of Serbia, the wife of the Grand Duke Ivan Konstantinovich, was frequently at the British consulate, where everything possible was done for her, but in spite of my energetic protests, the Bolsheviks took the princess with them when they evacuated the town. With the help of local white guards, the 3 above-mentioned Grand Dukes managed to escape from their captivity, but it is not known where they are at present. This is from Sir C. Eliot to Mr. Balfour, received January 2nd, 1919. It was written in Ekaterinburg on October 5th of 1918. Sir, I have the honor to submit the following report of what is known respecting the fate of the Russian imperial family, as well as a short narrative written at my request by Mr. Sidney Gibbs, formerly tutor to His Imperial Highness the Tsarevich. Mr. Gibbs accompanied the imperial children from Tobolsk to Ekaterinburg on the 23rd of May, but was not allowed to live in the house where they were confined with their parents in the latter town. The Bolsheviks of Ekaterinburg stated in speeches and proclamations that the Tsar was shot on the night of July 16th, but many of the best informed Russians believe that he is still alive and in German custody. I dare not, however, indulge the hope that this is true, unless some more adequate explanation that those current can be given of the opposed action of the Bolsheviks. The official in charge of the inquiry at the time of my visit showed me over the house where the imperial family resided. He dismissed as pure inventions that the stories commonly believed in Siberia, such as that the corpse had been discovered or that a member of the firing party had made a confession. On the other hand, he said that all the narratives of persons who thought they had seen the emperor after July 16th had been proved to be entirely without foundation. In his own opinion, the chances were 4 to 3 that the murder had been perpetrated. The house stands on the side The house stands on the side of a hill, and the entrance leads into the first floor where the imperial family lived. The ground floor, in which the guard was quartered, consisting of offices and kitchens. The latter, however, were not used for cooking, the only food allowed being military rations brought in from the outside, and some special dishes for the Tsarevich, which were supplied by the nuns of a neighboring convent. A wooden palisade hid the windows of the upper story, which were also whitewashed inside and kept closed even in the heat of the summer. The imperial family had to endure considerable hardships and insolence while they lived in the house. They were allowed only one walk of 15 minutes in the garden every day, but the Tsar found distraction in doing carpentering work in an open shed. At meals, the soldiers sometimes came in and took part of the meal off the table, saying that there was too much, and the imperial family were not allowed decent privacy. The rooms, when I saw them, presented a melancholy and dirty appearance, because the Bolsheviks had burnt a great quantity of objects in the stoves, and the ashes were subsequently taken out by the police and spread on the tables and floor with the object of discovering if they were contained anything interesting. There appears to be no evidence whatsoever to corroborate the popular story that on the night of the 16th of July, the Tsar was taken out of the house and shot by a firing party in the manner usual at Bolshevik executions, but there was some evidence that sounds of uproar and shooting were heard in the house that night, and that no traffic was allowed in the streets near it. The murder is believed to have taken place in a room on the ground floor, which was sealed up but kindly opened for my inspection. It was quite empty. The floor was of plain wood, and the walls of wood coated with plaster. Doggerel verses and indecent figures were scrawled on them. On the wall opposite the floor and on the floor were the marks of 17 bullets, or to be more accurate, marks showing where pieces of the wall and floor had been cut out in order to remove the bullet holes. The officials charged with the investigation having thought fit to take them away for examination elsewhere. They stated that Browning revolver bullets were found in all the holes, and that some of them were stained with blood. Otherwise, no traces of blood were visible, but there were some signs that the wall had been scraped and washed. The position of the bullets indicated that the victims had been shot when kneeling, and that other shots had been fired into them when they had fallen on the floor. Mr. Gibbs thought that for religious reasons the Tsar and Dr. Botkin would be sure to kneel when facing death. There is no real evidence as to who or how many of the victims were, but it is supposed that there were 5, namely the Tsar, Dr. Botkin, the Empress's maid, and 2 lackeys. No corpses were discovered, nor any trace of their having been disposed of by burning or otherwise, but it was stated that a finger bearing a ring believed to have belonged to Dr. Botkin was found in a well. On the 17th July, a train with the blinds down left Ekaterinburg for an unknown destination, and that it is believed that the surviving members of the imperial family were in it. It will be seen from the above account that the statement of the Bolsheviks is the only evidence for the death of the Tsar, and it is an easy task for indigenous and sanguine minds to invent narratives giving a plausible account of His Imperial Majesty's escape. It must indeed be admitted that since the Empress and her children, who are believed to still be alive, have totally disappeared. There is nothing unreasonable in supposing the Tsar to be in the same case. The marks in the room at Ekaterinburg prove at most that some persons unknown were shot there, and that might even be explained as the result of a drunken brawl. But I fear another train of thought is nearer to the truth. It seems to me eminently probable that the Bolsheviks of Moscow, or a section of them, wish to hand over the Tsar to the Germans. With this object, a commissioner went to Tobolsk and removed their imperial majesties in a summary but not unkindly manner, probably intending to take them to Moscow. He evidently knew that the temper of the Siberian Bolsheviks was doubtful, for he stopped the train outside Omsk, and finding that the local authorities intended to arrest the Tsar, he ordered the train to leave for Ekaterinburg, that is, to take the only other route to Moscow. But when the train reached Ekaterinburg, it was stopped by the local authorities and all the occupants removed. Subsequently, the imperial children were brought to Ekaterinburg from Tobolsk and placed in custody with their parents. The treatment of the imperial family at Ekaterinburg shows an animus which was entirely wanting at Tobolsk, and the Bolsheviks became more hostile and more suspicious as they felt that their own reign was coming to an end and that they must leave the city. There is some evidence that they were much alarmed by an aeroplane flying over the garden of the house, and I fear it is comprehensible that in a fit of rage and panic they made away with his imperial majesty. It is in the general opinion of Ekaterinburg that the empress, her son, and 4 daughters were not murdered, but were dispatched on the 17th of July to the north or west. The story that they were burnt in a house seems to be an exaggeration of the fact that in a wood outside the town was found a heap of ashes, apparently the result of burning a considerable quantity of clothing. At the bottom of the ashes was a diamond, and as one of the Grand Duchesses is said to have sewn a diamond into the lining of her cloak, it is supposed that the clothes of the imperial family were burnt here. Also, hair, identified also belonging to one of the Grand Duchesses, was found in the house. It therefore seems probable that the imperial family were disguised before their removal. At Ekaterinburg, I did not hear even a rumor as to their fate, but subsequent stories about the murder of various Grand Dukes and Grand Duchesses cannot but inspire apprehension. I have, and C. Elliot. Enclosure in number 8. Memorandum written by Mr. Sidney Gibbs, formerly tutor of the Tsarevich, and given to me, High Commissioner, on October 5th at Ekaterinburg. The Emperor had no great cause to complain of his treatment while living in Tobolsk, and physically he greatly improved in health. He seemed to feel that he absolved himself of a wearisome business and thrown the responsibility on other shoulders. The enforced leisure gave him more time to devote to what was undoubtedly dearest to him in the world, his wife and family. The Empress suffered more, but bore bravely up under all hardship. The Grand Duchesses were always happy and contented, and seemed satisfied with the simple life to which they were reduced. Although they pined for more exercise in the open air, the yard being a poor substitute for the parks, this indeed seemed generally to be their greatest hardship. The Grand Duke enjoyed fairly good health most of the time and suffered most from lack of youthful society, although the doctor's son was sometimes allowed to enter and play with him. The simple family life went on till the beginning of April, when the first important Bolshevik commissar, Yakovlev, arrived from Moscow. He was received by the Emperor, who showed him the rooms in which they lived, including the Grand Duke's room, where he was then lying ill in bed. At the end of the visit, he asked to be taken a second time to see the Grand Duke. After lunch on the 12th of April, Yakovlev announced to the Emperor and Empress that he was instructed to remove the Emperor, and hoped that he would not consent and not oblige him to use force. The Empress was greatly distressed, and at her desire was allowed to accompany the Emperor and take with her 3rd daughter, the Grand Duchess Marie. Hasty preparations were made for their departure. The imperial family dined alone, but at 11 o'clock invited all who were accustomed to dine with them to tea in the drawing room. Tea was served at a large round table carried into the room and was a very sad meal. The departure was fixed for 3 a.m., and shortly before that time, carts and carriages entered the yard. The Emperor drove with Yakovlev, and the Empress and Grand Duchess Marie in a half-covered tarantass. They were accompanied by Prince Dolgoruki, Dr. Botkin, and the Empress's maid, the Emperor's man, and one lackey. The carriages were strewn with hay, on which they sat, or rather reclined. The roads in a fearful condition. That thaws already begun, and at one point they were obliged to cross the river on foot, the ice being already unsafe. On the second night, they spent a few hours in a hut, and arrived on the following day at Tumen, where a train was in waiting which took them in the direction of Omsk. Some versts outside that town of Yakovlev left the train and went by motor car to the telegraph station to communicate with Moscow, and finding that preparations were being made in Omsk to arrest the imperial family, he returned to the train, which then left in the opposite direction and returned the way it came. However, on arrival at Ekaterinburg, the train was stopped and everybody removed. Prince Dolgoruki to prison and the others to a private house in the center of the town that had hastily been prepared for their reception. A high wooden fence of rough boards was hastily put up outside the house, and the windows whitened within. Here the Emperor, Empress, and Grand Duchess Marie lived till the 16th of July, the rest of the children being brought from Tobolsk to join their parents on the 23rd of May. For this journey, elaborate arrangements were made for its safe conduct, and the whole personal effects of the imperial family, as well as the furniture from the governor's house, were removed at the same time. The train arrived in the middle of the night, but was kept moving in and out of the station all night, and at 7 a.m. the children were removed, being placed in cabs and taken to the house. The night was cold, and heavy snow fell as they left. At tea, the Countess Hendrikov, the Empress's lady-in-waiting, Schneider, and the Empress's reader in Russian, and General Tachchev were taken away to the prison and have since been shot. At 11, 3 lackeys, the cook, and his boy were ordered to prepare to go into the house, and 2 certainly, most probably 4, were afterwards shot. The remainder of the establishment, consisting of the Baroness Bolshevism, lady-in-waiting to the Empress, the English and French tutors, and about 16 personal attendants and servants, were set at liberty and happily escaped. Since the departure of the Bolsheviks, the house in which the imperial family lived has been thoroughly examined, and undoubted traces of murder exist, but the number of shots are not sufficient to warrant the supposition that all the persons there confined were murdered. Part were murdered and part were taken away, and as the Grand Duchess's hair had been found, it is supposed that the imperial children were taken away disguised. Garments having been burnt in a forest outside the town also strengthens this supposition. The Bolsheviks announced after this date at a public meeting held in the theater and by bills posted on the walls that the emperor had been shot and the imperial family removed to a safe place, and to the present there is no evidence to prove the statement false, while the evidence of the hair would prove that at least the part of the statement concerning the children was true. But since that date nearly 3 months have passed. Other members of the imperial family confined at Alipvix, a small town 100 versts from Ekaterinburg, included the Grand Duke Serge Mikhailovich, Prince John Konstantinovich, Prince Igor Konstantinovich, and Count Vladimir Pavlovich, all of whom there is reason to fear have been killed. The Grand Duchess Serge, who was also there, is reported to have been wounded and taken away. Princess Helen Petrovna of Serbia, who came to Ekaterinburg to be near her husband, was arrested, as well as the 2 Siberian officers who came to induce her to leave, and has been removed, with the other hostages taken from the town. Mr. Austin to Mr. Balfour, received November 5th. Vladivostok, November 4th, 1918. Following from Consul at Ekaterinburg the 28th of October, quote, regret to report I am informed by Russian staff that when Alepovix was taken by Russian troops on 29th of September, corpses sufficiently preserved to be recognized of the Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fedorovna and of three royal prince John, Constantine, and Igor Konstantinovich, and also that of Grand Duke Serge Mikhailovich and lady in waiting, name yet unknown, were found in a mine pit in which they had been thrown, presumably alive, bombs being thrown on them which did not effectually explode. All were buried with ceremonial, large crowds attending. Princess Helena of Serbia, believed to be at Perm, where she was taken by Bolsheviks with Serbian mission when Bolsheviks evacuated Ekaterinburg, making through investigation. End quote.